Boldwood presents Dangerous Love of a Rogue, written by Jane Lark and read by Sophie Werner. Chapter 1. It was a renowned truth that any world-worn rogue without a feather to fly with must be on the hunt for a wife, or rather her dowry. As the parody of Miss Austen's verse from her charming little novel about country life ran through Drew's head, a sound of mocking humour rumbled through his chest, and he leaned a shoulder against the false pillar in the Earl of Derwent's ballroom, watching town life. The pillar was wooden, painted to look like marble. Like everyone in this damned room, it was a farce, a shallow image, a performance. Nothing here was what it seemed. Society lived a damned lie, and he had lived it for a lifetime. He was a bastard, sold by his mother to her husband as worth the risk of giving her naturally born son his family's name. They had to save the reputation of the Framlington title after all. Damn the title. Damn the bloody name. Drew had no interest in either. He was bored of this, bored of pretense, bored of the games these people and he played, bored of the face he displayed to the world. He had a plan to escape it all. Of course, plans required money, but his plan covered that. He was seeking a well-dowered young woman to take as his wife and earn himself an instant fortune. A fortune which he would use to pack up his bags and retire to a quiet life away from town, away from all this deception. Perhaps then he would experience the kind of life Miss Austen wrote about. "Have you seen Marlow's daughter?" Mark leaned to Drew's ear. "She would be a prize." Drew looked at his friend and lifted his shoulder away from the pillar, straightening up. "I have." "She looks remarkable." "She does indeed." He had been watching her. She was on his list of potential wives. "Are you intending to try for her?" "I would be a fool if I did not. Look at her." The she in question, Miss Mary Marlow, was as far out of reach as the sun. The half-sister of a duke, with a bastard? It was not a match that would be desired by her mamma and papa, yet Miss Marlow was very appealing to the eye. Drew had been waiting for the moment to explore his opportunity with her. The time had come. He had not been standing here for his pleasure. He'd been standing here waiting for Miss Marlow to complete her dance. "What are you waiting on?" Mark laughed, spotting the same opportunity. "Not a thing." Drew glanced over his shoulder and gave his friend a wicked smile before walking away, taking a route about the edge of the ballroom. He positioned himself close to the set Miss Marlow was in as the dance drew to its conclusion. When it ended, she stood 3 feet away with her back to him. Even though he could not see her face or her smile, he could feel her exuberance. He knew she was smiling. She'd smiled throughout every dance tonight. Mary Marlow was in her first season, newly launched upon the marriage market, and he was here to trade. But what his friends did not know was that as much as he desired her money, he desired her innocence. His heart and mind were jaded and bitter. The idea of marrying a pure, good woman was refreshing, invigorating. God knew he had never been given the blessing of innocence in his life. He was born into the world of sin, born of sin and raised in sin. Miss Marlow's partner lifted her hand to his lips, kissed the back of her satin glove and bowed. Drew stepped forward. "Miss Marlow." He said her name as though they'd been introduced and he had a right to use it, speaking before the man had a chance to offer to lead her back to her mother. They had never been introduced. She looked at him, her expression confused, but then she smiled, and it was as though the sun rose in the room, which was already illuminated by several hundred candles in the chandeliers. Her smile said, "I'm not sure I know you." Yet a young woman like her would never be rude enough to say such a thing aloud in company. When her companion let her go, Drew captured her hand, as if he had a right to that too. He felt as though he did. She had become his favourite choice of bride the minute she'd smiled. "May I have the next dance?" He bowed, but not wanting to push things too far, he refrained from kissing her hand. Though his gloved fingers did reach towards the underside of her wrist and touched her skin above the hem of her glove, making the gesture appear accidental. She lowered into a sweet, perfectly correct curtsy, looking down until the moment before she rose. Beautiful. Her eyes were an unusual blue, an extremely pale rim of colour surrounding the dark pupils that looked at him questioningly. "Who are you?" She knew she had never met him before, but, too polite for her own good, she continued to pretend they had been introduced. If he could have picked a dance for them, it would have been the waltz, but the first waltz was not until later, and he had no wish to lose the chance of the distance from her family. The Pembrokes were at the far end of the ballroom in their usual pack. Although Pembroke was not the name the family went by as a whole, the old Duke had had 4 girls. They had married exceptionally well, apart from Mary's mother, whose first husband, a soldier, had died. She then settled on the second son of an earl, but the son from her first marriage had inherited the title and given Miss Marlow a very attractive dowry, and so Mary was simply a miss, and yet a powerful match as a duke's sister, and a closely guarded and very well-bred innocent. "I believe you should stand here, and I there," Drew said, to her look of confusion. There was another quick smile, which was far more fleeting than the first. Perhaps she was beginning to realise she had made an error. He smiled broadly, to ease her concern. "I shall admit we have not been introduced. You must forgive me for taking the liberty of breaking the rules, Miss Marlow." The music commenced. He stepped forward and took her hand in the format of the dance, then completed a shoulder-to-shoulder turn. "I should walk away immediately," she said, in a strong voice that he'd not expected from this young woman. "Indeed you should. But is it a sin for a man to find you so beautiful he cannot wait even another moment, or at worst another dance, to find someone who might introduce him?" "That is the course of a gentleman." "It is." He leaned in closer. "But there you have me. Perhaps I am not a gentleman," he said, teasing her. His gaze dropped to the lopsided rogue smile he threw at her. She laughed. "You are a gentleman. You would not be here otherwise." So innocent, such a novelty. What he would give to have that blind belief in the facade of London society and be oblivious to the truth that lay beyond it. "Are you enjoying your season?" Her smile softened. "Yes, I had to wait because we've been in mourning for my grandsire. And my cousins, who are older, have been full of stories and made me long for this. Now, finally, I have my moment to join the world." Yes, she did. "Tell me how it compares to your expectations." As they talked, their steps followed the intricate country dance. But the blessing of it was he had by chance chosen a country dance that did not separate them. "I could not have imagined how crushed these events are, and how sore my feet would be from dancing until the early morning." "Yet you must have imagined that the young men would make fools of themselves at these things, and the old men would be bores, while the young women would giggle at the slightest compliment, and older women, like his mother, He would not talk to her about their behaviour.
"Do you think I giggle excessively?"
Annoyance had lowered her voice. No. They made a turn, and he took the opportunity to press his palm against her side, below her breasts. Her whole body jolted. He had only touched her for an instant, as if to stop her from stumbling. Forgive me. His apology implied it was an accident. The dance drew them close again. He faced her, his hand holding hers between their chests. He leaned so close, her hair brushed his cheek. I wish this was a waltz, and I had the opportunity to hold you. When he stepped back, her dark pupils sparkled, and her heartbeat flickered beneath the skin at the base of her neck.
Yet it is not a waltz, so please refrain, Mr.
Finally, she asked for his name. Lord Framlington. They separated and walked around the back of another couple. Her expression told him she was searching her memory for why she knew his name. No light of recognition dawned in her eyes. It was not her half-brother, the Duke of Pembroke, who had mentioned his name to her then. They came into the middle of a ring of 6 and danced in a circle, their joined hands above their heads. I like you, Miss Marlow, he said.
You do not know me.
He smiled at her little jab. No, you are not. I admire you. It was true. The girl intrigued him the more the dance progressed.
Really?
She laughed, a light, jolly sound, not a forced, jubilant creation, developed to draw attention and attract a husband. Pure, just herself, no facade. The girl was doing something to his soul. He felt as though he were bathing in her innocence, baptized in it, his sins washed away. It is no jest, and no falsity. You are charming. A man would be a fool if he did not see it. And I have been many things, but never a fool. He whispered the last words into her ear. Her head pulled back, his lips tilted into a smile.
My lord, you may speak as though you know me, but you do not.
Her voice had become firmer, her movements stiffer. Beyond those dancing, Drew saw her father deep in conversation with her brother. The Duke must have recently arrived. Damn it, there was probably only a dozen steps left of this dance. They glanced across the room. Drew looked at Miss Marlow. His time with the beauty was coming to an end. I am the son of a marquis. In theory, and yet if he was to sell himself, he must sell his best side. You may hear bad things of me, but disregard them. Please, judge me by the man you see. Admittedly, I am not like the young men I see you dancing with.
You have been watching me.
Her annoyance turned to horror, and before the dance had even ended, she took a step back. As I said, I admire you. Why would I not watch you? You are a beauty. He would guess when she looked about this room, she saw only the shimmer of the candlelight and the glass drops of the chandeliers, the flower garlands, the beautiful clothes, and people's smiles. Like looking at that damned wooden pillar, unless you touched it to know it wasn't cold like stone, or tapped it, you would never know the lie hidden beneath the paint. If he married her, he might lock her up to protect her innocence, so she would never have to see the ugly truth. The music ceased. She lowered in a curtsy, pretending she had not backed away from him. Half the room would be secretly laughing as they watched his gameplay, thinking, poor woman, God help her if Lord Framlington is chasing her. He did not wish her thought a fool. She was no fool. As she rose, her eyes seemed to observe things about him. He was not sure what she saw, yet he had asked her to do this, to judge him as the man she saw.
"Thank you for your honesty."
The words thumped him firmly in the chest. She'd taken him at his word, not by the history that had been woven into a web that trapped him. Rogue, rake, bastard, unwanted son, unwanted entirely.
"Good evening."
She turned and walked away. Her absence made him feel like something had been snatched away from him. Drew watched her cross the floor and join her family. Her father leaned to her ear and spoke hurriedly. She glanced back. Drew smiled. She smiled too, but it quivered with uncertainty. She knew the rumours now. Her father had instructed her, "Do not dance with that rogue." Damn the man, and damn all these people that looked down on him. Drew turned away to return to his friends, to return to his life. But he had a plan, and his plan now had a definite goal. Miss Mary Marlow. Winning the girl would be a challenge. There was no denying that. But he loved a challenge. "Drew?" A hand touched his arm and stopped him. "Come to my room tonight." As he faced Lady Wharton, her hand moved from his arm to his crotch and caressed him through the fabric of his pantaloons. He had just bathed in innocence, and now he was soiled with sin again. He'd lied when he'd said he was entirely unwanted. Women of his mother's ilk desired his presence, but only in their beds. He removed Lady Wharton's hand. "I am not inclined tonight, Bets. Find another toy." He did not wait for her reply. He was so damned bored of his life. He had been born into it like a whore into a brothel. He had not chosen this life. It had chosen him. For years he had enjoyed the sex, the money, and gifts the women gave him. But now he wanted choice, and the only way to achieve it was to marry money. "Drew!" Another of his friends, Peter, caught his attention, lifting a hand. "Peter, you're late. Where were you?" "I, my friend, have been—" Drew listened to Peter recounting the experiences of his evening as he faced the room, looking past Peter's shoulder. Miss Marlow was not dancing. She stood with her father, brother, and a woman he did not recognise. It looked as though Mary was receiving at worst a scolding, at best a warning. Drew looked at Peter. "Who is that with Pembroke?" The Pembroke women, including Miss Marlow, were all dark-haired. It was one of the strongest characteristics of their beauty: jet black hair, pale skin, and pale blue eyes. But this woman was blonde. "Pembroke's wife." Good Lord. He had not expected Pembroke to marry for years. He was not like his sister. He was no more innocent than Drew, and he did not need money. They had travelled in the same circles on the Grand Tour. Pembroke had been one of the women's toys too. He had walked away from the demi-monde a while ago, though. Now he looked down on the men he used to call friends, men like Drew, who had no choice but to live that way. "Why?" Peter asked, his hand resting on Drew's shoulder. "I simply wondered." "I thought you were interested in the sister. You will hardly have a chance there if you pitch for the man's wife." "I have no more interest in married women." Mary's mother was speaking to her now. Mary glanced across the room, and he knew, even though he had no evidence of it, that her eyes were seeking him. An odd sensation leapt in his chest. He would have said it was his heart, but like Pembroke, he did not really have one. That had been kicked far too many times in his life. Mary's gaze had not found him. Instead, she faced her mother and said something in return, the fingers of the hand he could see forming a little fist as she expressed some forceful point of view. "Stop drooling over the fair Miss Marlow and come and play cards." I ought not, I have no money. If you need funds, I'll lend you more. Come and play. Mark and Harry are in a game, so I need you for my pair. Very well. Drew played a few hands of cards at the tables with his friends for an hour. They did not normally attend such affairs, but Derwent's wife was in his mother's set, and so any young man with poor morals had been encouraged to attend. After the ball, the night would end in an orgy, but by then he and his friends would be gone. He had never liked those kinds of games. I am out. He'd played for long enough. If he wished to escape his current life, he must return to the task of fulfilling his plan. Settle what you owe before you leave. Fortune had played against him. Drew looked at Peter, who nodded as his hand moved to his pocket. Drew rose. Good evening, gentlemen, he said, then shared a look with Peter that said, I shall see you in a while. It was all well and good to have a generous, wealthy friend, but how could a man respect himself when he lived off his friend like a leech, or from the services he rendered to flesh-hungry wives? The devil take his life. He no longer wished for it. If he'd been born in different circumstances, his father might have paid for a commission in the army, or a placement in the clergy. The Marquis of Framlington had given Drew his name, and begrudgingly paid for Drew's bed and board through his years of schooling, but that was all he would do to save face. Then Drew had learned a way to earn freedom from his false father's house. If only he'd known then that he was tying himself up in a new hell. He should have saved the money the women gave him and paid for a commission himself. He'd been too young and too greedy. He'd squandered it at card tables. His losses and debts had built up and sucked him into the power of his mother's friends. They'd been paying the duns on his behalf for years, never enough to clear the debt, just enough to make him come back. He returned to the ballroom and looked for Miss Marlow. He spotted her instantly. Her dark curls bounced on her shoulders as she skipped through the steps of another country dance. He truly liked the girl. But it would be safer not to put all his eggs in one basket. He scanned the other debutantes in the room. There was an auburn-haired lady he danced with at previous balls. She was not as pleasing on the eye as Miss Marlow, but her dowry was substantial. He moved towards the set she was among, preparing to take her hand for the next dance. A woman was spun out of the last turn of the current dance and collided with him. It was Pembroke's newly acquired wife. Her gaze met his as her chest rose and fell with her quickened breaths. She had blue eyes, but they were not pale like her sister-in-law's. Damn it, but he was tempted to play a game. If he settled on Miss Marlow, then Pembroke would most likely fight him all the way. She turned back to her partner. Drew saw Pembroke speaking with Lady Elizabeth Ponsonby, Drew's eldest sister. She was older than Pembroke too by a long way. She married young and adopted their mother's unfaithful way of life. He knew Pembroke and she had had a liaison for a while. She was the one who had pulled Pembroke into the demi-monde. Pembroke had been as innocent and stupid as his little sister. Like a baby presented to the women in a linen cloth, here is another young male for you to mislead. Drew never spoke to Elizabeth or acknowledged their connection. Yet, if Elizabeth was interested in Pembroke again, she would not let him escape easily, which gave Drew time. Your Grace. He caught the hand of the Duke of Pembroke's young bride before she could walk away. Would you dance with me? Her large blue eyes displayed her confusion, but, like her sister-in-law, she was too polite and naive to deny him. Of all the dances, it was a waltz. He brought her close, so her breasts pressed to his chest. She stepped back, setting 2 inches between them. This was going to be amusing, at least. He spun her several times, holding her securely, as her hold was so light it felt as though she were trying not to touch him at all. "Where did you meet the Duke of Pembroke?" he asked.
"At Pembroke Place, Lord Framlington. I lived near his family home."
She did know who he was then. He had misjudged her. "Is your marriage as blissful as you hoped?" He was being sarcastic. Her mouth opened, but she said nothing, unsure how to respond. Well, there it was then. Another cold, loveless society marriage that would end in sin and shame. He did not plan that for himself. He hoped for more in the marriage he sought. But first and foremost, he sought a woman who would be loyal. He may have cuckolded dozens, but he did not wish for that from his wife, and he would honour her with loyalty too. Drew saw Pembroke conversing in whispers with Elizabeth, already perhaps agreeing to play his poor wife false. Drew felt a sudden urge to punish Pembroke. He had won this beautiful woman, and even now was treating her poorly. In time, she'd run out of patience and turn elsewhere too, and that is how innocence became debauched. She looked away from him as they turned, her head turning so she could keep looking at Pembroke. Drew had been brought up to be wicked. He leaned to the Duchess's ear as they spun. "Pembroke is dull. Perhaps when you tire of him, you might think of me. I would be willing to warm your bed if it is cold." It was a joke, a silly, spur-of-the-moment move. The woman snapped her head back, a look of horror on her face, as though he'd slapped her. "I will never tire of my husband." She had not kept her voice low, not caring if others heard, and she walked away in the middle of their dance, completely ignoring the risk of scandal. Her outburst could have left him feeling vexed. It did not. He wished a woman would stand up for him as adamantly. She truly cared for Pembroke. He moved back and joined those at the edge of the dancing. Pembroke met his wife not far away. He had disposed of Elizabeth. He looked at Drew with thunderclouds in his eyes as he walked through the dancers. Pembroke did not show emotions. Drew believed him to be as unmovable as stone. When Peter told him Pembroke had married, Drew thought he'd selected a duchess. But the look in Pembroke's eyes, the anger, implied the man felt as much for his wife as his wife felt for him. Drew had made a mistake. Fortunately, before Pembroke collided with any couples, the dance came to an end. The last note played as his fingers closed around Drew's throat with a force that said, "She is mine." Then he hissed, "I had already made a note this evening to warn you not to dance or speak to my sister. Now I am also warning you to stay away from my wife or I will kill you." The hand at his throat pushed Drew back a step before letting go. Drew smiled and straightened the knot of his neckcloth. He felt like laughing. He would not have guessed that Pembroke had a heart, nor that he would be able to make a woman fall for him so deeply. Drew merely nodded, then turned away. He saw Miss Marlow being returned to her parents by her latest partner. She glanced over her shoulder as though she felt his gaze. He raised a hand. She sent him a tentative smile. She had not heeded her brother's and her father's warnings. He returned to the fake marble pillar and watched. Several of the men in the knot of the Pembroke family group rested their hands at their wives' waists, and the couples stood close, barely inches between them. Some of them had been married for years. The Earl of Barrington turned and said something to his wife, then kissed her lips. Barrington was Mary's uncle on her father's side, and Drew had heard he'd been a rake, as wicked as they came, until he married. Now he was never in town, unless he was with his wife. Wiltshire, another duke, the Duke of Arundel, who was as hard-nosed as Pembroke, laughed about something. Then mid-conversation he turned, looked at his wife, lifted her fingers to his lips, and kissed them. He continued the conversation with others, as if it were nothing odd. Drew saw Mary's father lean and say something in his wife's ear. She smiled at him, shook her head, then kissed his cheek. They were all affectionate, every couple. He was looking at his idea of utopia. Of course, it could be false, but if it were real, if it were true, then there was no doubt about his choice. If Miss Marlow was as capable of constancy as the other women in her family, why would he choose another? She was his plan. After tonight, they would wrap her up and keep her away from him. But never mind. He could take his time. His need for her dowry was not desperate. He had a little more credit he could call on, and he wanted what the Pembrokes had. Commitment, constancy, even affection. Perhaps he would have all of that with Mary. "Are you ready to retire?" Peter's hand settled on Drew's shoulder. He also had a friend with generous pockets. "Yes." Drew looked at his friends, Peter, Harry and Mark, his brothers, his family. "Did you fare better than I?" "The richest of us did," Mark quipped. "The man who does not need it." "I won back your losses and more," Peter clarified. "So I say that earns us a drink and a pretty bird of paradise each." "I'll take the drink, but I shall pass on the whore." The thought of lying with any woman, other than the one he'd chosen to be his wife, was abhorrent. "Then I shall have yours as well as mine," Harry joked. As they walked out of the ballroom, Drew asked Peter, "What do you know of the Pembroke sisters and their daughters?" Mary was sitting on her bed, with her knees bent up and hugged in her arms. Her bare toes peeped from beneath her nightgown. Her mother had dismissed the maid and helped Mary undress.
"Mamma, why did you choose to marry Papa?"
She was placing Mary's earbobs into their box. She turned. "Why do you ask?" Because a particular gentleman's hazel eyes hovered in her mind, along with the lilt of his smile. "There you have me. Perhaps I am not a gentleman." That, her brother John had told her father, and her father had told her. Lord Framlington is a fortune hunter, a rake. Avoid him. "Judge me by the man you see," he had said. "When I met your father," her mother sat on the bed. "Our eyes met across a table, and I just knew he was right for me." Her skin had pinked with a blush.
"Do you think I will know?"
"I hope you will. I hope you find a man who will love you with all his heart." Lord Framlington's eyes, his face, returned to her mind. There was something fascinating about him. He was different to any other man who had spoken to her. "You have been quiet tonight. Did you not enjoy the evening?" Mary smiled. "I enjoyed myself." "Come along then, jump into bed, and let me tuck you in." "I'm too old to be tucked into bed." "You will never be too old," her mother teased. After she got into bed, her mother kissed her cheek, then tucked the sheet tightly beneath the mattress. "Sleep well. I love you, Mary." Her cold fingertips touched Mary's cheek.
"I love you too, Mamma."
Her mother extinguished the candles in the candelabrum, collected a single candle burning in a holder, and walked to the door. "Good night."
"Good night."
She left the room, the light disappearing with her. Mary saw Lord Framlington in the darkness. He'd stood against a pillar, watching her for most of the evening. He'd looked lonely, sad. She ought to feel nothing for him. She ought to never think of him again. He had been courting her dowry, nothing more. Yet there was something about him. She had continually wanted to look at him. "I like and admire you," he had said. Her thoughts drifted into dreams, and he joined her there. Chapter 2. The following year. Miss Mary Rose Marlow's whole body jolted with surprise. "Oh!" she exclaimed, nearly falling down the short flight of garden steps she'd just climbed. A broad, masculine chest faced her. Lord Framlington caught hold of her elbow, saving her, only to pull her towards the chest which had caused her exclamation. He'd appeared from behind the hedge and blocked her path. Her fingers pressed against the front of his morning coat, discovering solid muscle beneath. Unladylike longings besieged her. She had never forgotten him, and she was ashamed to admit she had often thought about kissing him. Angered by the desire she should not feel, Mary planted her palms on his chest and pushed, denying the attraction that pulled at her. She looked up and met his gaze. She hoped her anger burned a visible flame in her eyes. If he saw her ire, the dark amber brown of his eyes absorbed it with cool, quelling disengagement. Her stomach wobbled like aspic with an unwilling hunger for the reprobate. "Miss Marlow?" He raised his hat a little. "It is my good fortune to collide with you." Mary stepped back, careful to avoid the steps, her hands falling to her sides as she bobbed a hardly recognisable curtsy. The garden path, lined by tall yew hedges, was barely wide enough for one. She could not pass him without further contact unless he moved aside. "Lord Framlington," her voice rang sharp with irritation, "if you will excuse me, I really ought to be getting back." She moved to pass him. He stepped to the side and blocked her. "No haste, Miss Marlow. The garden party is still in full swing. No one will notice our absence. Everyone is busy, playing Lady Jersey's outdoor games. Have you tried your hand at the archery butts? You could aim an arrow at my heart if you wish. I would not complain. You might snare me if it came from Cupid's bow." "Do not be absurd." The words flew out of her mouth. His comment was too close to her secret wish. "You know my brother advises against you." "The Duke of Pembroke." Condescension sharpened his words, and a roguish smile tilted his lips. Oh, she remembered that smile. It had plagued her dreams since last summer. "What do I care for his opinion? And what do you? I think he did me a favour warning you off. You have been enamoured ever since." "He knew." "I have not." Mary's hands balled to fists. This was infuriating. Why did she find him so interesting? Because on one evening, nearly a year ago, he had danced with her and talked as no other man had. He grinned. "Careful, or I shall think you protest too much. Besides, I know because I saw you watching me. Whenever I turn, there is Miss Mary Marlow staring across the room." He leaned forward, his face inches from hers. "Your looks call to me, Mary. You whisper to me, 'Come, come, Framlington, closer.'" His husky pitch made her skin tingle with awareness, and possibilities coursed through her blood. His lips were so close. He lifted his hand, and his gloved fingers gently braced her chin. "Well, here I am. Come to you. What will you do with me?" "Run away." She lifted her chin away and took another step back. "Let me pass. I should not be speaking with you." "But you are." He stepped forward. When she danced with him last season, his glittering light brown eyes had melted her bones. She'd fallen irrevocably in love with him during that dance. But afterwards, John had advised her that Lord Framlington was a beast, a fortune hunter, chasing dowries. Worse, he was a rake, a philanderer, a seducer, not to be trusted in the least. It is folly talking to him. Then let me rectify that. She moved to pass him. His hand wrapped about her upper arm, stopping her and turning with her, so they stood side on, facing one another in the narrow gap between the dense greenery of the yew hedges. "Stop running and pretending you do not like me. I'm not blind. Besides, run and my predatory instincts say chase." On the last word, he leaned forward, pulled her closer, and pressed his lips against hers. His other hand came to her nape, urging her not to turn away. His lips brushed across hers. Mary's mind screamed, "Run!" but her body had longed for this kiss. This was her first kiss. Her hands lifted to his shoulders, and she clung to him, opening her mouth at his urging, and when his tongue invaded her lips, a rush of twisting need slid through her stomach, reaching to the central point of femininity between her legs. This was what she'd imagined and longed for. He moved closer. The thin, neatly clipped branches of the yew trees pricked her back as the intensity of his kiss increased, growing in determination, the connection intoxicating. His palm rested over her breast and squeezed it through the thin muslin of her gown. A sweet, sharp pain travelled from her nipple, catching her breath. It was delicious. But still it was pain, and it was enough to rip her focus from his kiss to rational thought. What am I doing? What am I letting him do? She ended their kiss so abruptly, it caught him off guard. He stumbled back and gave her the chance to escape. She fled, not daring to look back for fear he'd follow. "Miss Marlow," he called after her, a note of humour in his voice. "I know you feel the same for me as I feel for you. Stop running and come back to me." When she did not stop or look back, he called again. "Well then, if not now, whenever you wish, simply give me a sign, and I shall find a way we can meet." She lifted the skirt of her dress and ran along the path, her breath heavy and her lips burning. Only when she reached the end of the path did she slow to a walk and let her dress fall. The lawn was crowded with elite society. Her fingers pressed against her breastbone. She must be blushing. She had let a man her father and brother had explicitly warned her against kiss her. "Mary, there you are." She turned as her brother's voice cut the air. "We were coming to find you."